The sleek corridors of the Aphrodite hummed with an electric anticipation as Keith strode towards the bridge. His fingers brushed against the smooth metallic walls, a habit he'd developed to ground himself in the vastness of space. The ship was unlike any he'd served on before. Cutting-edge technology merged seamlessly with an almost organic design aesthetic. As the doors to the bridge hissed open, Keith's breath caught in his throat. There, silhouetted against the star-studded viewport, stood the most captivating alien he'd ever laid eyes on. Her skin was a mesmerizing shade of emerald, seeming to shimmer under the ambient lighting. As she turned, her eyes locked with his, pools of golden fire that sparked something primal within him. "You must be the new helmsman," she purred, her voice carrying an otherworldly melody. "I'm Nira, xenobiologist and first officer of the Aphrodite." Keith swallowed hard, trying to regain his composure. "Keith Thompson, at your service," he managed, extending his hand. "Though I have to say, your beauty's left me a bit starstruck." Nira's laughter tinkled like wind chimes. My, aren't Earth males forward?" She took his hand, but instead of shaking it, she traced a delicate pattern on his palm. On Anobius, such a greeting would be considered quite intimate. Heat flooded Keith's cheeks. I didn't mean to offend." "Oh, you haven't," Nira assured him, a mischievous glint in her eyes. "In fact, I find your species' directness rather refreshing. Shall we begin your tour of the ship?" As they moved through the Aphrodite's decks, Keith found himself constantly aware of Nira's proximity. She seemed to have no concept of personal space, brushing against him at every opportunity. In the engine room, she leaned close to explain the intricacies of the warp drive, her breath warm on his ear. In the hydroponics bay, she guided his hand to feel the texture of an alien fruit, her fingers lingering on his. "So Keith," Nira said as they entered the mess hall, "tell me about Earth mating rituals. Are they as entertaining as I've heard?" Keith nearly choked on his synthesized coffee. "Well, that's a loaded question," he laughed nervously. "I'm not sure I'm the best authority on the subject." Nira tilted her head, curiosity evident in her expression. "Oh, but surely you've participated in these rituals. A handsome specimen like yourself must have many admirers." I do all right," Keith stammered, desperately searching for a way to change the subject. "What about Anobius? Any interesting customs I should know about?" A sly smile spread across Nira's face. "Oh, many. For instance, did you know that on my world it's customary to initiate physical contact with potential mates by gently nibbling their earlobes?" Keith's eyes widened. "You're pulling my leg, right?" Nira's brow furrowed in confusion. "Pulling your leg? Is that an earth mating ritual?" Unable to contain himself, Keith burst into laughter. No, it's just an expression. It means I think you're joking with me." "Ah, I see," Nira replied, her golden eyes twinkling with amusement. "Well, perhaps I am pulling your leg about the ear nibbling, but I assure you, Anobius mating rituals are far more intense than anything you might find on Earth." The tension between them crackled like static electricity. Keith found himself leaning closer, drawn in by Nira's otherworldly allure. "Maybe you could give me a demonstration sometime," he said, surprising himself with his boldness. Nira's lips curved into a seductive smile. "Careful what you wish for, Earthling. You might find yourself in over your head." Before Keith could respond, an alarm blared through the ship. "Warning! Airlock malfunction detected. Emergency protocols engaged." "Damn," Keith muttered. "We should check that out." They rushed to the nearest airlock, finding the doors sealed shut. "The system's gone haywire," Keith said, examining the control panel. We need to manually override it from inside. Both of us? Nira asked, raising an eyebrow. Keith nodded. It's a two-person job, but it'll be tight in there. I'm sure we'll manage, Nira purred, her eyes raking over Keith's form. As they squeezed into the airlock, Keith became acutely aware of every point of contact between their bodies. Nira's skin radiated an alien warmth, and her scent, something like exotic flowers and ozone, filled his senses. Right, Keith said, his voice husky. You take the left panel, I'll take the right. We need to synchronize the override codes. They worked in tandem, fingers flying over the controls. With each passing moment, the air seemed to grow thicker, charged with unspoken desire. As they input the final sequence, their hands brushed, sending a jolt of electricity through Keith's body. The airlock doors slid open with a hiss, but neither of them moved. They stood frozen, bodies pressed together, breathing heavily. Well, Nira said softly, her lips mere inches from Keith's. That was invigorating. Keith's heart pounded in his chest. He knew he should step back, maintain some semblance of professionalism, but every fiber of his being screamed to close the distance between them. Nira, he breathed. Bridge to Commander Nira, a voice crackled over the intercom. Your presence is required for the upcoming mission briefing. The spell broken, they hastily disentangled themselves. Nira smoothed her uniform, a faint purple blush coloring her cheeks. Duty calls, she said, her voice tinged with regret. But I look forward to continuing our cultural exchange, Keith. As she sashayed away, Keith leaned against the airlock wall, his head spinning. What had he gotten himself into? And more importantly, how far was he willing to let it go? The rest of Keith's shift passed in a blur of routine tasks and stolen glances. Every time he and Nira crossed paths, the air seemed to crackle with unspoken tension. He found himself inventing reasons to visit the bridge, just for the chance to bask in her presence. As he lay in his bunk that night, Keith's mind raced with thoughts of emerald skin and golden eyes. He knew he was playing with fire. Fraternization between crew members was frowned upon, let alone interspecies relationships. But there was something about Nira that made him want to throw caution to the wind. Just as he was drifting off to sleep, his comm unit chimed. A message from Nira flashed across the screen. Meet me in observation deck 3 at 0200 hours. There's something I want to show you. Keith's pulse quickened. He knew he should ignore it, maintain some semblance of professionalism. But even as he thought it, he was already reaching for his uniform. The corridors were eerily quiet as Keith made his way to the observation deck. As the door slid open, his breath caught in his throat. The room was bathed in the soft glow of a nebula, casting everything in shades of purple and blue. And there, silhouetted against the stars, stood Nira. She turned as he entered, a smile playing at the corners of her lips. I was beginning to think you wouldn't come, she said softly. Keith swallowed hard. I probably shouldn't have, he admitted, but I couldn't stay away. Nira glided towards him, her movements fluid and graceful. Do you know why I asked you here, Keith? He shook his head, not trusting himself to speak. On Anobius, we have a saying, Nira continued, stopping mere inches from him. The stars align but once in a lifetime. When they do, it's a sin to look away. Before Keith could process her words, Nira's lips were on his. The kiss was electric, sending shock waves through his entire body. Her skin was impossibly soft, her scent intoxicating. Keith's hands found her waist, pulling her closer as the kiss deepened. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. Nira, Keith panted, we shouldn't... she placed a finger on his lips, silencing him. "Don't think, Keith. Just feel." As they came together again, all thoughts of propriety and protocol vanished from Keith's mind. In that moment there was only Nira, the stars, and the infinite possibilities stretching out before them. Little did they know, their passionate encounter was being observed. In a hidden control room, technicians monitored banks of screens, each displaying different areas of the Aphrodite. One of them turned to his colleague, a look of concern on his face. "Things are escalating faster than anticipated between subjects K and N," he said. "Should we intervene?" The other technician shook her head. "No, let it play out. This is exactly the kind of data we need for the interspecies compatibility project. Besides," she added with a smirk, "it's just getting interesting." As the observation deck faded from view, replaced by lines of code and biometric readings, Keith and Nira remained blissfully unaware of their true circumstances. For them, the universe had shrunk to the size of an observation deck, and the only reality that mattered was the one they were creating together. The gentle hum of the Aphrodite's engines pulsed through Keith's body as he made his way to the bridge. His mind still reeled from the encounter with Nira in the observation deck. Her emerald skin, her intoxicating scent, the electricity of her touch, it all felt surreal, like a dream he was afraid to wake from. As the bridge doors hissed open, Keith's eyes immediately sought out Nira. She stood at her station, her lithe form accentuated by the form-fitting uniform. As if sensing his presence, she turned, a mischievous smile playing on her lips. "Good morning, helmsman," she purred, her golden eyes dancing with unspoken promises. "I trust you slept well?" Keith felt heat rise to his cheeks. "Like a baby," he lied, knowing full well he'd tossed and turned all night, his thoughts consumed by her. "Excellent," Nira replied, her voice dropping to a sultry whisper, "because we have quite the adventure ahead of us today." Before Keith could inquire further, the ship's AI chimed in. "Attention, crew. We are approaching the Cerulean Nebula. Prepare for atmospheric entry." Keith's training kicked in as he took his position at the helm. His fingers danced across the controls, guiding the Aphrodite through the swirling gases of the nebula. Brilliant hues of blue and purple filled the view screen, creating a mesmerizing spectacle. "Incredible," Keith breathed, momentarily forgetting himself. Nira leaned in close, her breath tickling his ear. "If you think this is impressive, wait until you see what's inside." As they emerged from the nebula, a gasp escaped Keith's lips. Before them stretched an impossibly beautiful world, floating islands suspended in a sea of shimmering purple clouds, interconnected by crystalline bridges that sparkled in the light of twin suns. "Welcome to Ether," Nira announced, her voice filled with pride. "My people's ancestral home." As they disembarked, Keith marveled at the alien landscape. The ground beneath his feet seemed to pulse with energy, and the air itself tasted of exotic spices. Nira led him across one of the crystal bridges, her hand firmly grasping his. "Watch your step," she warned playfully. "The gravity here can be a bit unpredictable." As if on cue, Keith felt a sudden shift, his body becoming lighter. He stumbled, only to be caught in Nira's surprisingly strong arms. Their faces were inches apart, her golden eyes boring into his. "My hero," Keith quipped, trying to mask his racing heart with humor. Nira's lips curved into a seductive smile. "Oh, I haven't begun to play hero yet, Earthling." They spent hours exploring the wonders of ether. Nira showed him flowers that sang when touched, and fruits that changed flavor with each bite. As they walked through a grove of bioluminescent trees, Keith couldn't help but feel that something was off. Everything was too perfect, too fantastical. "Nira," he began, his brow furrowed. "How is all of this possible? I've never seen anything like it in all my years of space travel." For a moment something flashed across Nira's face. Uncertainty? Fear? But it was gone so quickly, Keith thought he might have imagined it. "The universe is vast and full of wonders, Keith," she said, her voice taking on an almost rehearsed quality. "There's so much we have yet to discover." Before Keith could press further, an alarm blared through the air. "Emergency! Atmospheric disturbance detected. All personnel report to safety zones immediately." The serene landscape around them began to warp and twist. The crystal bridges cracked, and the floating islands started to drift apart. "We need to get back to the ship," Keith shouted over the chaos, grabbing Nira's hand. They raced across the disintegrating landscape, leaping over chasms and dodging falling debris. Keith's military training kicked in, his body moving on pure instinct. He pulled Nira close, shielding her with his body as they made a final desperate sprint for the Aphrodite. As they tumbled into the airlock, breathless and disheveled, Keith couldn't shake the feeling that something about the whole experience felt artificial. The danger, the adrenaline, even the world itself, it all seemed too convenient, too perfectly designed to push them together. But as Nira looked up at him, her eyes wide with a mix of fear and exhilaration, all doubts fled from Keith's mind. She was real, their connection was real, and that was all that mattered. "Earthling," Nira whispered, her voice trembling, "what are you doing to me? This is incredible." Keith's response was cut short as the ship lurched, throwing them both off balance. They scrambled to the bridge where chaos reigned. Warning lights flashed and the view screen showed a massive energy storm engulfing the planet. "We need to get out of here," Keith growled, sliding into the pilot's seat. His hands flew over the controls, coaxing every ounce of power from the engines. Nira worked beside him, her movements perfectly synchronized with his. Together they navigated the treacherous energy waves, the ship groaning under the strain. As they finally broke free of the planet's atmosphere, a collective sigh of relief echoed through the bridge. Keith turned to Nira, a grin spreading across his face. "Now that's what I call a successful first date." Nira's laughter, rich and melodious, filled the air. "Oh, my dear Keith, if you think that was exciting, you haven't seen anything yet." The next few days passed in a blur of exhilarating missions and stolen moments. They rescued colonists from a mining station on the verge of collapse, their bodies pressed close in the cramped escape pod. They navigated an asteroid field, Keith's piloting skills pushed to the limit as Nira called out trajectories. With each shared adventure, the tension between them grew. Lingering touches, heated glances, and flirtatious banter became the norm. Keith found himself constantly teetering on the edge of professionalism, drawn inexorably towards Nira like a moth to flame. It was during a particularly harrowing mission to retrieve a lost probe that things came to a head. As they maneuvered through a dangerous nebula, the ship's systems began to malfunction. The view screen flickered, strange lines of code flashing across it for a split second before returning to normal. "Did you see that?" Keith asked, a note of concern in his voice. Nira's brow furrowed. "See what? The nebula's interference is probably just causing some visual distortions." But Keith couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The flickering increased, and for a brief moment he thought he saw something else. A room filled with monitors, people in lab coats. He blinked, and it was gone. The nebula stretched out before them, as beautiful and deadly as ever. "Keith?" Nira's voice snapped him back to reality. "Are you all right?" He forced a smile. "Yeah, just a bit of space fatigue, I guess. Let's finish this mission and get some rest." As they successfully retrieved the probe and set a course back to their assigned patrol route, Keith's mind raced. What had he seen? Was it just his imagination? Or was there something more going on? His thoughts were interrupted by Neera's hand on his arm. "You know," she said softly, "there's a magnificent view of a double sunset from Observation Deck 4. Care to join me?" All doubts fled from Keith's mind as he looked into Neera's golden eyes. "I wouldn't miss it for the world," he replied. The observation deck was bathed in the warm glow of the twin suns as they slowly dipped below the horizon. Keith and Neera stood side by side, their hands almost touching on the railing. "It's beautiful," Keith murmured, his eyes fixed on the cosmic spectacle before them. "Yes, it is," Neera replied, but when Keith turned to look at her, he found her gaze fixed firmly on him. Time seemed to slow as they leaned towards each other. Keith's heart pounded in his chest, every nerve ending alive with anticipation. Their lips were mere inches apart when suddenly the ship shuddered violently. The lights flickered, and for a split second the stars outside the viewport were replaced by lines of code. Keith blinked, and everything was back to normal. "What the hell was that?" he gasped, looking around wildly. Neera's face was a mask of confusion, and was that fear? I'm not sure. Perhaps we should check with engineering." As they made their way to the engine room, Keith couldn't shake the feeling that something fundamental had shifted. The corridors seemed less solid somehow, the edges of reality blurring ever so slightly. In engineering, they found the crew in a frenzy, frantically working to stabilize the ship's systems. "Report!" Neera barked, slipping effortlessly into her role as first officer. The chief engineer looked up, his face pale. "We're not sure, Commander. It's like the ship forgot it was a ship for a moment. All our systems show normal, but for a split second everything just glitched." Keith's mind raced. Glitches. Code. The strange visions he'd been having. It all pointed to one impossible conclusion. "Neera," he said slowly, turning to face her. What if none of this is real?" For a moment something flashed in Neera's eyes. Recognition. Fear? But it was gone so quickly, Keith thought he might have imagined it. "Don't be ridiculous, Keith," she said, her voice steady but with an undercurrent of something. "Of course this is real. We're here, aren't we? We can feel. We can touch." She reached out, her hand caressing his cheek. The warmth of her touch sent shivers down Keith's spine, momentarily silencing his doubts. He leaned into her hand, closing his eyes. When he opened them again, Neera was looking at him with an intensity that took his breath away. "Keith," she whispered, "whatever is happening, whatever doubts you're having, know that this, us, is real. I've never felt anything more real in my life." As their lips finally met in a passionate kiss, all thoughts of glitches and unreality faded from Keith's mind. In that moment, there was only Neera, the stars, and the infinite possibilities stretching out before them. But deep in the recesses of his mind, a small voice whispered a warning that would soon become impossible to ignore. The Aphrodite's corridors seemed to pulse with an otherworldly energy as Keith and Neera made their way to the observation deck. Their hands were intertwined, fingers dancing across each other's skin in a silent promise of what was to come. The air between them crackled with anticipation, every stolen glance igniting a fire that threatened to consume them both. As the doors to the observation deck hissed open, Keith's breath caught in his throat. The view before them was nothing short of spectacular, a cosmic ballet of swirling nebulae and glittering stars, painting the void in hues of purple and gold. "It's beautiful," Keith murmured, his eyes fixed on the celestial display. Neera turned to him, her golden eyes shimmering with an intensity that made his heart race. "Not as beautiful as you, Earthling," she purred, her voice low and husky. Keith felt heat rise to his cheeks. Even after all they'd been through, Neera still had the power to make him feel like a fumbling teenager. "Neera," he began, his voice thick with emotion, "I need to tell you something. I've never felt this way about anyone before. It's like—" "Shh," Neera interrupted, placing a slender finger on his lips. "Don't speak, just feel." As their lips met in a passionate kiss, the universe seemed to fade away. Keith's hands found Neera's waist, pulling her closer as her fingers tangled in his hair. The kiss deepened, years of pent-up desire and longing pouring out in a single, heated moment. Suddenly the ship lurched violently. The observation deck flickered, the stars outside replaced for a split second by a grid of harsh, artificial light. Keith and Neera stumbled, breaking apart as reality seemed to warp around them. "What the hell?" Keith gasped, looking around wildly. The deck was back to normal, but something felt off. The edges of everything seemed slightly blurred, as if he was looking at the world through a thin veil of water. Neera's face was a mask of confusion, and was that fear? "Keith," she whispered, her voice trembling, "what's happening?" Before he could respond, another violent tremor shook the ship. This time, the illusion shattered completely. The observation deck dissolved into pixels, revealing a stark white room filled with complex machinery. Keith felt a sudden sickening lurch as his mind struggled to process the radical shift in reality. "No," he breathed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "No, this can't be happening." The world around him continued to glitch and distort. He caught glimpses of his real surroundings, a small, cluttered apartment on Earth, before being yanked back into the disintegrating virtual world. "Neera!" he called out, reaching for her. But she was fading, her form becoming translucent. "Neera, stay with me." "Keith!" her voice came, distorted and distant. "Earthling, what are you doing to me? This is incredible and terrifying." With a final, wrenching sensation, Keith felt himself being pulled away. The last thing he saw was Neera's face, a mixture of longing and sorrow etched across her features before everything went black. Keith's eyes snapped open, his heart pounding in his chest. He was lying on a couch, a sleek VR headset clutched in his trembling hands. The familiar sights and sounds of his Earth apartment assaulted his senses. The hum of the air recycler, the faint smell of synthesized coffee, the distant rumble of sky traffic outside his window. "Keith? Honey, dinner's ready." His wife's voice floated in from the kitchen, jarringly normal after the fantastical experiences he'd just lived through. He sat up slowly, his mind reeling. It had all been virtual? The Aphrodite, the adventures, Neera. None of it was real? But it had felt real, so incredibly, viscerally real. He could still feel the ghost of Neera's touch on his skin, could still smell her exotic, alien scent. "Coming," he called back to his wife, his voice hoarse. As he stood, his legs wobbled, unused to Earth's gravity after so long in the simulated environment of the Aphrodite. In the kitchen, his wife Sarah greeted him with a warm smile. Their two children, Emma and Jake, were already seated at the table, arguing good-naturedly over the last slice of synthetic pizza. "How was your session, dear?" Sarah asked, setting a plate in front of him. "You were under for quite a while this time." Keith stared at the food, his appetite gone. How could he explain what he'd experienced? The adventures, the danger, the connection he'd felt with Neera? It was intense, he managed, forcing a smile. The new Interstellar Explorer program is really something. Sarah nodded, her eyes showing a flicker of concern. You've been spending a lot of time in there lately. Is everything okay? Keith felt a pang of guilt. He'd been neglecting his family, hadn't he? Choosing the fantasy of space exploration and alien romance over his real-life responsibilities. Yeah, everything's fine, he lied. Just got caught up in the excitement, I guess. As they ate, Keith found himself only half listening to his family's chatter. His mind kept drifting back to the Aphrodite, to Neera. Was she real in some sense? A program designed to be the perfect companion? Or was she out there somewhere, on her own planet, wrestling with the same confusion and longing that he felt? After dinner, as Sarah put the kids to bed, Keith found himself drawn back to the VR headset. His fingers itched to put it on, to dive back into that world of adventure and possibility. But something held him back, a nagging sense of guilt, of responsibility to the life he'd built here on Earth. He was still staring at the headset when Sarah returned. "You're thinking of going back in, aren't you?" she asked softly. Keith sighed, running a hand through his hair. I don't know. It's just, it feels so real in there, Sarah. Like I'm actually out there, exploring the stars, making a difference. Sarah sat beside him, her hand finding his. "I know you've always dreamed of space, Keith, but this isn't real. We're real. Your family, your life here. Isn't that enough?" Keith felt tears prick at the corners of his eyes. "I don't know," he whispered. "I just don't know anymore." As he lay in bed that night, sleep eluding him, Keith's mind raced with possibilities. Could he give up the virtual world with all its wonders and excitement? Could he content himself with the mundane reality of life on Earth? Or would the lure of the stars and of Neera prove too strong to resist? Meanwhile, light years away on the planet Enobius, Neera was grappling with her own crisis of reality. She had awakened in her home, surrounded by the familiar sights and sounds of her own world. But it all felt strange, almost artificial, after the vivid experiences aboard the Aphrodite. Her life partner, Zax, had greeted her with concern. "You were in the simulation for a long time, my dear. Is everything all right?" Neera had forced a smile, trying to ignore the ache in her chest. "Yes, just lost track of time, I suppose." But as she moved through her daily routines, tending to her offspring, attending council meetings, performing her duties as a xenobiologist, Neera found her thoughts constantly drifting back to Keith. His rugged human features, so alien and yet so captivating. The warmth of his touch, the intensity of his gaze. "It wasn't real," she muttered to herself as she stared out at the purple skies of Enobius. "He's not real. This is your life, your world." But even as she said it, Neera knew it wasn't entirely true. The connection she'd felt with Keith, the experiences they'd shared, they may have taken place in a virtual environment, but the emotions were real. The longing she felt was real. As the days passed, both Keith and Neera found themselves struggling to readjust to their respective realities. They went through the motions of their daily lives, but a part of them remained aboard the Aphrodite, lost in the stars and in each other's arms. Keith threw himself into his work at the space agency, hoping to recapture some of the excitement he'd felt in the simulation. But the mundane tasks of his earthbound job paled in comparison to the adventures he'd experienced virtually. Neera immersed herself in her xenobiological studies, analyzing data from real interstellar probes, but every alien life form she cataloged only reminded her of the vibrant, complex being she'd come to know in Keith. Finally, after weeks of inner turmoil, they each found themselves faced with a choice. The developers of the Interspecies Compatibility Project had announced a new, extended program. Participants could spend months in the simulation, exploring the depths of space and forging connections with alien species. Keith stood in his living room, the VR headset in his hands. Sarah watched him from the doorway, her eyes filled with a mixture of understanding and sorrow. "You're going back, aren't you?" she asked quietly. Keith nodded, unable to meet her gaze. "I have to, Sarah. I can't explain it, but I need this. I need to know if what I felt was real." Sarah stepped forward, placing a gentle hand on his arm. "Just promise me you'll come back, that you won't lose yourself in there." Keith finally looked at her, his eyes shining with unshed tears. "I promise. I'll always come back." On Anobius, Neera faced a similar decision. Her family and colleagues had noticed her distraction, her longing for something beyond their world. When she announced her intention to participate in the extended simulation, there was concern, but also a grudging acceptance. "You've always been drawn to the unknown," Zach said, his tone a mixture of pride and resignation. "Just remember who you are, Neera. Remember your home." As Keith and Neera prepared to re-enter the virtual world, neither knew what awaited them. Would they find each other again? Would their connection survive the knowledge of their true realities? Or would the fantasy crumble under the weight of their real-world responsibilities? The moment of truth arrived. Keith lay back on his couch, slipping the VR headset over his eyes. Neera reclined in her pod, the neural interface humming to life around her. As the familiar sensation of falling into another reality washed over them, one thought echoed in both their minds. "Real or not, this is where I belong." The simulation engaged, and once again, the stars beckoned. The Aphrodite shimmered into existence around them, more vibrant and real than ever before. As Keith and Neera's eyes met across the bridge, a spark of recognition, of longing, and of hope passed between them. Whatever challenges lay ahead, whatever difficult choices they would face, in this moment, they were together. And in the vast, virtual expanse of space, anything seemed possible. Dear listeners, thank you for embarking on this interstellar journey with Keith and Neera. I hope their story of virtual love and real emotions resonated with you and perhaps made you ponder the nature of reality in our increasingly digital world. Now, you might wonder why I chose to write a sci-fi romance that blurs the lines between virtual and real. Well, I'll let you in on a little secret. Earlier today, someone suggested I couldn't write about love. Challenge accepted. But why stop at a simple love story when we can explore the complexities of human connection in a world of advancing technology? This tale was my attempt to prove that love stories can be both entertaining and thought-provoking. Plus, who doesn't enjoy a little alien flirtation now and then? If you enjoyed this cosmic romance and its deeper themes, I'd be thrilled if you could show your support with a like. And please don't be shy. Leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Did Keith and Neera's story make you laugh, cry, contemplate upgrading your VR headset? Your feedback is invaluable and might just inspire my next literary adventure. Who knows? Maybe next time we'll explore the love life of sentient space debris. Thank you again for your time and for allowing me to share this story with you. May your own reality, virtual or otherwise, be filled with excitement, love, and only occasional system glitches. Warmest regards, your Sci-Fantasy. Be peace. No actual laws of physics were harmed in the making of this story. The same cannot be said for my sleep schedule.